Welcome back to Tales and Truths, where real stories touch real hearts. Today's journey is one you won't forget, so grab a coffee, settle in, and let the road take you somewhere unexpected. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss tomorrow's powerful story. Trust us, it's one you'll want to be here for. Ready? Let's begin. She thought he was just a trucker until he changed her life forever. Chris Williams adjusted the brim of his baseball cap as he pulled his truck into a quiet stop off a rural highway in Ohio. The engine let out a long sigh before falling silent. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the worn steering wheel, taking in the silence. For most people passing by, he looked like just another tired trucker on a long route. But Chris wasn't just another trucker. He was the 28-year-old CEO of one of the largest logistics companies in the United States. Just weeks ago, he had been sitting in a glass office high above the city, making decisions that affected thousands of employees. Board meetings, spreadsheets, and private flights were his daily routine. But something had been nagging at him. Every time he read another report on driver turnover, job dissatisfaction, or staffing shortages, he felt further disconnected. He didn't want numbers. He wanted to understand the people behind them. So he made a decision few CEOs would ever make. He swapped his designer suits for flannel shirts, his corner office for a sleeper cab, and hit the road in disguise. He wasn't here for publicity. No camera crew followed him. No one in the company knew, not even his executive team. For the next few weeks, Chris Williams would be just Chris, another driver hauling goods across the country, sleeping in rest stops, grabbing meals at diners, and listening to the chatter of real workers. He thought he was prepared. He'd read every report, reviewed every route. But nothing could have prepared him for the reality he was about to face. The exhaustion, the isolation, the quiet dignity of people pushing through day after day, and the invisible barriers that kept them from a better life. He had come to learn. He had come to listen. But what he would find on this journey would shake him to his core and change the way he viewed his company, his leadership, and the entire trucking industry forever. What began as an undercover mission soon became something much deeper. Chris was about to meet someone who would make this more than just research. She would turn it into a mission. Chris stepped out of the truck, stretching his legs as the cool morning breeze swept across the empty parking lot. The truck stop sat on the edge of a small Ohio town, quiet, almost forgotten. He rubbed his eyes, still adjusting to life on the road. After days behind the wheel, he felt the fatigue settle into his bones. But something about this stop felt different. As he walked toward the diner, a woman sitting alone at a picnic table caught his eye. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, her hands wrapped tightly around a cheap styrofoam cup of coffee like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Chris had seen tired people before, but this wasn't just tired. This was someone barely hanging on. He hesitated, then went inside. The diner was simple: worn linoleum floors, faded menus, and the smell of old coffee. As he ordered his drink, he overheard a conversation near the counter. The woman outside had come in. Her voice was low, trembling. "I'm sorry," she said to the cashier. "I don't have enough for the full breakfast. Can I just get toast?" The cashier shifted uncomfortably. Behind him, the manager stood watching, arms crossed. Chris knew that look: strict, unbending. The kind of manager who only saw policies, not people. Before the cashier could respond, Chris stepped forward, pulling a few bills from his wallet. "Add whatever she wants to my order," he said. The woman turned, startled. Her eyes widened. "I can't let you do that," she said quickly. "It's just breakfast," he replied with a shrug. "No big deal." She hesitated, then nodded, whispering, "Thank you." They sat across from each other at a corner booth. Her hand still shook as she picked up her fork. "I'm not usually like this," she said. "I work. I take care of my son. But things, they got bad." Chris leaned in. Something in her voice, raw, honest, cut straight through him. This wasn't part of the plan. He hadn't come looking to save anyone. But in that moment, as she told him her story, he knew this was the real reason he was here. He just didn't know how much it would change him. Chris listened, his coffee growing cold between his hands as Sarah's story unfolded. Her voice was steady now, but her words carried the weight of too many sleepless nights. She told him how she'd lost her warehouse job just a month earlier. No notice, no severance, just a layoff slip and a "we're sorry." Since then, it had been a downward spiral. Bills kept piling up. Her car had broken down, and with no money to fix it, even getting to job interviews became a challenge. Chris nodded slowly, absorbing every word. He'd seen reports filled with percentages and projections, but none of those numbers told stories like this. None of them captured the panic in a mother's voice as she described selling her last few belongings to keep the lights on. "I tried everything," Sarah said, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "I even started training to be a truck driver once, years ago. But then life happened. I had my son, and I never finished. Now I can't even afford to retake the test." Her eyes dropped to the table. "He's staying with a friend right now. I told him it's just temporary. But the truth is, if I don't find something soon, we won't have a place to stay next week." Chris felt something shift in his chest. He had come here to understand his drivers, to see their world through their eyes. But now, looking at Sarah, it felt personal. She wasn't just a struggling mom. She was proof that the system was broken, proof that people willing to work couldn't even get their foot in the door. "What if," he paused, carefully choosing his words, "if you had a way to get your CDL, would you still want to drive?" Her eyes lifted, cautious but hopeful. "In a heartbeat. It's good money. It's stable. I could finally provide for my son again. But who's going to take a single mom with no experience?" Chris didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced around the diner. Two drivers nearby were venting about fuel costs and cut hours, unaware their CEO was sitting just a few feet away. The frustration in their voices echoed what Sarah had been saying. In that moment, Chris realized this wasn't just about her. It was about hundreds, maybe thousands of people just like her, trapped by barriers they didn't create. And maybe, just maybe, he could be the one to tear them down. Chris sat in silence, Sarah's words echoing in his mind long after she left the diner. The pain in her voice, the exhaustion in her eyes, it wouldn't let go of him. He had spent years building a successful company, priding himself on being the kind of leader who cared about people. But now he saw just how far removed he'd been. His company had the power to change lives, but it had also unintentionally built walls. Walls people like Sarah couldn't climb over. That night, in his small motel room, Chris stared at his laptop. The luxury of his penthouse felt like a different life. He wasn't thinking about profits or performance reviews. He was thinking about Sarah and how many others were out there like her. People with the drive to succeed, but no way to access the opportunities they deserved. He opened a new email, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The subject line was simple: urgent proposal, CDL access program. By morning, the email had been sent to his board of directors. But there was one more thing he needed to do. Chris drove to the warehouse where Sarah had mentioned she was working part-time. He spotted her inside, lifting heavy boxes, her thin jacket doing little to protect her from the cold. She looked surprised when she saw him, a little wary. "What are you doing here?" she asked, brushing hair from her face. Chris stepped closer, heart pounding. "I have something to tell you." She crossed her arms. "Let me guess. You found someone who might help me get into training?" He shook his head. "This isn't a maybe. It's a guarantee." He reached into his jacket and handed her his company ID. Confusion spread across her face as she read the name. Her breath caught. "You're the CEO?" Chris nodded. "And I'm making sure no one else in your position has to go through what you did." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as he handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a full scholarship for her CDL training. No strings attached, no debt. Her hands trembled. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. Chris smiled softly. "By succeeding, by proving everyone who doubted you wrong, and by being the first of many." Because this wasn't about charity. It was about rewriting the rules. Sarah stood frozen outside her apartment, the envelope still in her hand, her mind racing to catch up with what had just happened. Everything she thought she knew about Chris had been turned upside down. He wasn't just a kind stranger. He was the CEO of the very industry she'd been trying to break into, and he had just handed her a future she never thought she'd have. For years, she had fought to survive, scraping by on minimum wage, sacrificing sleep, meals, and moments with her son. Now, for the first time, she had a chance to build something real. Mom, are you okay? Her son asked, tugging gently at her sleeve. She dropped to her knees and cupped his small face in her hands. I'm more than okay, sweetheart, she said, smiling through the tears. Things are about to get so much better. The next few days were a whirlwind. Sarah gave notice at the warehouse, packed up the small apartment she could barely afford, and prepared for her CDL training. Chris had arranged everything, from a company car to pick her up to a place to stay near the training center. She couldn't believe it was real until she walked into the facility on her first day. Heads turned. Whispers followed her. The story had gone viral. The single mom who helped a CEO rediscover his purpose. Climbing into the cab of a truck for the first time, Sarah felt something powerful: control. For once, life wasn't just pushing her around. She was in the driver's seat, literally. Weeks turned into months. Sarah studied harder than she ever had in her life. She learned every maneuver, passed every test, and earned the respect of everyone in her class. When she finally passed her CDL exam, she didn't cry. She smiled, strong and proud, because she knew she had earned it. The first person she called was Chris. I was waiting for this call, he answered, a grin in his voice. I did it, Sarah said, her voice steady with pride. I never had a doubt. As she stood at the edge of the open road, keys in hand, she realized something else. This wasn't the end of her journey. It was just the beginning. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this powerful story. What part of Sarah and Chris's journey resonated with you the most? Have you ever faced a moment in life where all you needed was just one chance, one person to believe in you? Stories like this remind us that real change often starts with small acts of compassion and the courage to do something different. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing our community grow across the country and beyond. Whether you're tuning in from a big city or a small town, your voice matters here. And if you've ever had to fight through tough times or know someone who has, share your story in the comments. You never know who you might inspire just by being honest. This channel is about more than just storytelling. It's about connection, empathy, and reminding each other that we're not alone in our struggles. So don't just scroll past. Take a moment, leave a comment, and be part of something meaningful. We read every single one, and your voice helps us keep these stories alive.